Hey everyone, welcome to the Vienna Whyte Roundtable, Season 1, Episode 26. I'm your host, Millie Rouge from the band Vienna Whyte here in Edmonton, Alberta. This roundtable is a Yank music production. Thank you all for being a part of the show today. I wanted to start off today by chatting with Will.
Hi guys, my name is Will. I am one half of an indie rock duo from Los Angeles called Ships Have Sailed. We're kind of like, well, I said indie rock, but with kind of like a pop-timistic lean, I like to say. So like pop and optimism is kind of our thing. I like to find a silver lining no matter what the situation or what the song. And so you'll find that as you dig into our music, even the kind of stuff that leans a little bit darker, because we do have that range, you might find a little bit of sun in there if you look for it.
Now, JAD, can you tell us a little about yourself?
Yeah, my name is JAD. I'm from Toronto. Almost on the, I don't want to say the opposite end of things, but my music is very, I guess, indie is the best way. It falls in the genre of music, whatever I feel like, really. But it's very emotionally based. I mean, I guess all art is to a degree. But I kind of approach it from the way of you need to appreciate all the other, all the other emotions that we are able to feel, thankfully. So we have to kind of acknowledge those and appreciate those and reflect on those in order to appreciate all the optimistic stuff. So in a way, it's somewhat of an antithesis to your music, Will, but not in a negative way, just on a different side of things. I find that interesting, though.
Thank you all for sharing. Now I wanted to dive into a little bit more about your music careers to kind of find out how you guys got to kind of where you are today. Now, JAD, I wanted to just in about like 2 minutes or less, can you give us a brief description of how your musical journey came to be from when you first started to where you are today?
For sure. Okay, let's do the quick rundown. My mom discovered I could sing when I was 3 because I was singing along to the Backstreet Boys from the back of the car. And then since then it was basically just my identity was like the kid who sings. So my mom just pushed me in every way. And I was always singing, and then I started kind of getting more into studying music around the age of, like, let's say 12, 13. Right before high school, I auditioned to go to an arts high school in Ottawa. So that I was born and raised in Ottawa. So I went to the arts high school there for voice, and after that, or during high school rather, I started my first band. We did a lot of fun stuff. And that was cool. Then university kind of took us our separate ways, and I continued studying voice in university in an opera vocal performance stream. And university was my relationship with academia is very interesting, as my mom's a professor as well. So it's kind of, there's some stuff there. But that was very, very interesting. And then following that, I moved to Toronto to pursue my own stuff. And so since then, it's been a very interesting journey, making the shift from a purely collaborative, effort with being in a band and fronting a band to just doing things on my own. So I still play with a band depending on the show, but it's a very different dynamic because it's not necessarily our songs, it's my song, and I'm getting people to play. So very interesting. And then last couple of years actually been to LA a couple times to record with Greg Cortez at New Monkey Studio. I'm a big Elliott Smith fan, so that was really special for me. And just working on new songs and kind of learning how to produce on my own and doing all that. So that's kind of where we're at now.
That's fantastic. Now, what kind of drew you to go to LA to record? Just really quick out of curiosity.
Yeah, it was actually two main things. My best friend moved there to study acting at LACC, and so I wanted to go visit him. And being a huge Elliott Smith fan, I knew of New Monkey Studio still, being just in Van Nuys, still being operational and stuff. And so I was on this trip to go visit my best friend, and I messaged the studio on a whim and just said, kind of come by and just see what it's like. Yeah. And they were like, yes, for sure, come on down and check it out. And it just kind of went from there. What was supposed to be a studio tour ended up into like a 1 day of recording, and then
that's amazing.
Just a friendship there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Really cool. Now, Will, I know you have a band and you have more to talk about with yourself. How did you kind of get to your journey of starting out as a musician to getting into the band that you are in today?
Yeah, it's a long story, but cliff notes. And JAD, I think you and I have probably more in common than we initially may have thought. My journey also began at around 3 years old, maybe just before, because I don't think I was quite talking yet. And my mom was a really big fan of classical music, and she had like a Vivaldi concerto on, and she went out of the room, and I was like playing with blocks. The story goes that she came back in and I was like humming along to Vivaldi, and she was
Nice.
like, okay. So so she put me in violin lessons, and then after that piano lessons, and I was a really bad classical student. I really loved the music and I loved learning by ear, but I liked to look at my hands when I was playing, and I liked learning by ear, and I hated looking at sheet music.
Yeah.
So my instructors really didn't like that.
Yeah.
And so I kind of, discovered more popular forms despite my mom's musical taste. And I started gravitating towards those, and I picked up guitar and bass, and I just started teaching myself how to do all of that. Through my early teen years and into kind of my later post high school, it was mostly like grungy, punky stuff, like not very great songwriting, but we had a lot of fun with it. And then in college, still on the heavier side of the spectrum, I would say like I was leaning towards hard rock and metal. The songwriting got quite a bit better at that time. I was studying some, recording engineering and that kind of stuff. I went to school at Northeastern in Boston. And then once I graduated, I moved out to LA and kind of started leaning a little bit more like alt rock. So in LA, actually linked up with a guy. The first week I moved out there, I auditioned for his band, and that kind of wound up growing into a few different iterations of things that eventually got signed and was really kind of like growing and seemed to have a lot of potential. But it's kind of like the typical story where like right as you're like at the crest of the hill, there's like 6 guys in the band and not everybody's seeing eye to eye, and he's starting to come in and not everybody's getting paid. And so it was kind of one of those things where everything kind of crashed and burned right at the top of where you could have gone.
Yeah.
And this is kind of where my silver lining comes in, because as this was happening, I had this collection of songs that was really not a fit for this project, right? And so I started trying to produce them as demos, and got a few that were kind of presentable, asked a couple friends over, and they were just like, oh, these are great. What are you going to call it? So as this EP, as it turned out, was kind of materializing, the other project was kind of circling the drain, and I got really contemplative and just, because this new music felt really good, I was very connected to it, and it felt like the right thing to do. But the other project was like, I'd invested like years of my life, and it felt like a disappointment at the time.
Yeah.
I started kind of examining that and really thinking about like, there are lots of disappointments in life. It doesn't necessarily mean that that is the wrong thing to have happened just because it feels, not the greatest at the time. So I was just like, I guess missed opportunities, and the phrase "that ship has sailed" popped into my head kind of late night after like working and maybe a couple of whiskeys, and I was like, man, that really is a little bit negative. Like maybe it should be more agnostic and just like, ships have sailed. And I was obviously at the same time, like over the past couple of years or the past couple of weeks, I'd been racking my brain over a good band name, right? Because it's impossible to create one. And I was like, oh, well, that's actually a really good band name. And I'm like, I bet it's taken. So I go and I Google it, and like everything's available. So I was just like, okay, cool, that's it.
Meant
And
to
so,
be.
yeah, so that's kind of why I've embraced that philosophy around this project. And it's not to say that we don't, like, I always find that songs are much, much better when they come from a place of truth. And,
Hmm.
you know, I would say easily half, if not more, of life is pain.
Hmm.
So if you're writing about truth, then you kind of have to write about pain, right?
Yeah.
But so I guess the whole optimism and silver lining, it's not that I'm trying to kind of like bypass
No, of course.
all of those emotions. It's more just like trying to find the optimism
Hmm. Within it.
even in the middle of all of that,
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like that's, you know, it's a really important aspect of life, to be able to you know, find the meaning
That's about
behind.
balance, right?
Exactly. And
Hmm.
the meaning behind the less pleasant
For sure,
experiences.
for sure. I
Yeah.
definitely kind of going off that. I remember an experience I had. Um, this was back in the 12th grade. I was doing a creative writing class because I wanted to be able to kind of put more into my own writing, and I was really struggling because I had all these. At least I felt that I was struggling. I had, you know, all these peers who were uh, just really, really skilled. Um, and I felt that whatever I wrote never just didn't live up, and I kept trying to make my writing like theirs.
Hmm.
And I remember my teacher at the time, she was fantastic. She said one thing that I always refer back to, and she says you have to write what you know. And it's the same idea, you know. It needs to come from a place of truth.
Yeah.
If you don't really know what you're writing about, if you don't know that experience, if you're not bringing that, it's, you know, it's just not,
Little
it's
bit
not going to
inauthentic.
connect. Yeah, it's not going to connect in the ways it should, I think, right?
Yeah.
And I definitely feel that for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, exactly. And I think honestly, all of us have had that type of experience where
Hmm.
we're like trying to emulate something that we admire,
Hmm.
and we
Hmm.
just go way too far outside of our own, like,
Yeah.
you know, you have to be truthful when you're writing, whether
Yeah.
it's a song or poetry or like
Hmm.
honestly even a painting, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to be truthful to how you're feeling and express that in a way that's natural to you.
Hmm.
Yeah, we've all been there, man. That's I can
Yep,
definitely
we
relate
definitely all have. I have myself too, so I
For
feel
sure.
that. Thank you guys for sharing. That was honestly like amazing to hear from the both of you. Now, I actually want to dive into our topic for today, which is the proper way to release your own music.
Mm.
Now, as both of you have kind of mentioned, you've had experience with different projects and kind of moving into your own projects, so your own new band and your own solo project. What I wanted to chat about was the proper way to release music. So I know a lot of beginner stage artists, they kind of overlook the actual aspect of releasing music and how important it is to do it correctly. Now, can you tell us about your first experience with releasing music ever? Now, Will, do you want to start off and tell us about your first release of music, whether that be through streaming services or way back in the day when it was just like CDs? What was your first kind of experience like?
I mean, so I'm old, so my first experience was printing CDs.
Awesome.
And actually even before that, it was probably just like hand dubbing, like, you know, 20 demo tapes and like hand wrapping them in like printed, you know, whatever. But I would say, you know, to stay relevant for anybody who's listening, I'll go back to the first Ships Have Sailed EP, which
Mm.
is a 6-song EP called Someday. We did have it printed on CD. Um, it was also my first experience releasing anything myself through an aggregator, like a distributor.
Yeah.
For that, I used TuneCore. Recently, I've been using DistroKid, and I've kind of tried a bunch of different ones, everything from AWOL to Amuse. I haven't tried CD Baby, but TuneCore and Someday specifically, it was a very interesting experience. Less because of the distribution, although I did learn that it's better to actually create your own ISRC codes than to just have the automated ones made for you, because it'll make them more uniform as you kind of like want to switch distributors. But more so just from the release cycle. So that EP, I really didn't have any strategy around it whatsoever. I just kind of like it's done. I'm going to upload it. I'm going to set a release date. I'm going to put it out there. And interestingly enough, we did find some, like, or rather some press outlets found us and some people found us. And it was very fortunate that that was the case.
Mm-hmm.
The lesson that I learned is that you always need to have a plan. And also, like, it's not only just about leading up to the release. Like, your release plan should include at least 6 to 8 weeks of follow-up after the release. You should have different types of content that you're going to use to just kind of like not only promote, like, of course you want to be promoting, but I almost find that having kind of conceptual content that just shines a light on the release in a subtle way and gets people curious about it is really useful. A lot of our songs recently have inspired our fans to kind of start sending me stories that either the song kind of like reminded them of a struggle that they overcome, or like anything like that. We had a single last year, Escape, which is a really kind of, it's much more on the dark emotive side of our spectrum, and I almost thought that people weren't going to like it, and it went out there, and all of a sudden I started getting like a couple messages a day of people being like, oh my God, this song spoke to me and here's why. And some of these stories were really, really intense, like long emails that just were really hard to read, some of them. But very, like, I felt very lucky that people were entrusting me with those types of experiences and stories from their lives. And so it kind of gave me a light bulb, and I started asking people if they would mind if I shared kind of like edited versions and or responses to their stories. And I kind of like worked it up as kind of like a quote, and then, you know, on Instagram you can swipe into a video and that kind of thing. And it became a really, really powerful piece of the campaign, even though with that song it just kind of started happening. With our current single, Rise, I did it a little bit more intentionally, just because in the situation we're in right now, we're all kind of navigating this new and changed world. And I think in these types of opportunities, people have one choice or another. You can either embrace the best of humanity, or you can like hoard all the toilet paper and the, you know, canned goods and be the worst.
Yeah.
So I've been asking for our fans to just kind of like share their observations and or their moments embodying the best of humanity. And I think that that's kind of a really good thing to shine a light on right now, especially. So in this case, I did it a little bit more deliberately. In that case, it was much more organic, which was a surprise, and I had to really react quickly to it. But yeah, I guess, sorry, long-winded answer. I would say the most important, like, you can choose DistroKid or TuneCore or CD Baby. All of them will get your music out there. I think the most important thing in planning a release is actually what you're doing around the song to make people connect to it, and to even if you can't predict how they're going to connect to it, you know, react to how they're connecting to it if you possibly can, because that is, you know, that's what it's all about, is those connections. And you have to be willing to kind of like ingest a lot of that stuff, especially if you're putting out emotional music, because it'll hit people in their emotions, and it can be a little bit intense, but it's really, really beautiful and powerful as well.
I think as a songwriter, that's one of the coolest experiences to have that happen, is to have someone reach out to you and be like, this is how your song made me feel. This is how I'm touched by it, or how I'm moved by it. So I think that's really incredible that you got to have that experience. And I think it's also really interesting that you took that and kind of made something from it that personalizes your band, like you're saying, with all the quotes. And I actually noticed that on your Instagram, all those quotes on the arms and the legs, and I was kind of curious to hear the backstory. So thank you for sharing. Now, JAD, with your music that you've released, can you tell us a little bit about kind of your experience of maybe some of the positives or the negatives of how it went?
Yeah, for sure. So my first experience releasing music was with my band in high school, and we this was like before, I guess, Spotify was really huge and Apple Music was huge and all that.
Mhm.
So it was CDs, and I think we just did it. We just did it like I guess in the most organic way that we could. I mean, it's very different being in a band in high school because you exist in this community within a community, right? And so everything you're doing, everybody knows, and it's very different from, I think, being in a band or being a musician after that, where everybody's kind of separate. So it was, very, I guess, for lack of a better word, it was very easy to get people interested, I think, just because they were our friends or they'd heard of us or whatever, right? So I remember by the time, we graduated, it was kind of known. There was the band and all that. And that summer we'd planned a big album release. And we rented out a hall in this old church. It was actually really, really cool. So it was this whole, like, we were just playing shows. Some of those shows were like 40 people. Some of them we played to a room of 5 people once. I mean, it was everything. I think every musician has that experience.
Yeah.
And so we really didn't know what to expect because we had not really put much into, like, we didn't pay for PR. We had some media contacts because my bassist's girlfriend at the time, her parents owned an art gallery in Ottawa, and so they knew some people, so they helped us do a write-up, and we just went full force sending it out, trying to get as much attention as we could. And so thankfully we did get some good attention, and it kind of came all around this time. So we did the album release in August of 2000. Trying to remember what year I graduated. 13. Anyways, we did the album release in August of that summer, and we had no idea what to expect, because the hall fit like 300 people max, and we had no idea if we would even meet those numbers. But anyways, to kind of condense it, we went through the whole CD printing process, had a friend of ours design the album art, go through all that, and the day of the show comes, and my dad's like, Chad, there's a lineup. I'm like, why? For what? I'm in there setting up, and I'm like, what's the lineup for? He's like, for the show. I'm like, what do you mean? And I go outside, and there's a lineup going down, down the entire street, and I never expected it. So filled that room, and I think that also kind of helped, coming off the news that we had received news that we would be playing the city's music festival that the following month, right? So there was a lot of kind of hype coming in, I think, just around us giving it our best go, and just playing, and just doing things as organically as possible. I mean, we were 17, 18 at the time. We didn't really know the best way to do content, this and all that. After all of that, kind of, when the band fizzled out and we went our separate ways, I wasn't making music for a long time. So when I came back into it, I really had no idea what I was doing. And I did everything backwards. I probably did it the way you people would tell you shouldn't have done it. Normally, I guess what people do now is, they get a steady amount of songs under their belt, record them, get them ready to release, and, get that release plan underway, plan everything down to the day, right? And coming off of those singles, getting press, getting attention, more with each one, then kind of leading up into the album. I didn't do that at all. I was kind of getting back into it was coming out of a little bout of depression after not making music for so long. I didn't really know what I could do. I didn't even know if I could still write anything. I didn't know if anything was good. So I was working with an engineer that my friend introduced me to, and he kind of pushed me to, I just wanted to record a few songs, and he said, you could make this into an EP, you could make this into an album, whatever. So we did that, but anyways, to make it even shorter, sorry, I'm rambling.
No, that's okay.
I was moving to Toronto. I knew I was going to do that. And I said, okay, well, you know what? We have this album. Let's move to Toronto and put the album out. Did not invest in PR. I just did everything myself. Thankfully, the response was good. It wasn't, astronomical, but I got a really good response from people. And again, it was an organic way to do all of that. I think after being in Toronto for a couple of years and meeting people and watching my friends kind of do their thing as bands, right? I've learned that, I guess if I could sum it up into one important lesson, there's the best way to release your music is the way that makes the most sense for you and that feels organic and true to you.
Yeah.
I'm the kind of person where I've always had an aversion to that influencer culture. I really don't like it. And so I don't want to present myself that way, but at the same time, there still is a way to organically engage with the people who are listening to your music and who know you, whether they're friends or fans. And, the best way to present yourself, I think, comes down to just literally just be yourself. I remember a friend asked me, how do you do your Instagram feed and this and that? I'm like, well, I just do what I want, because when you think about it, the people who are engaging with your music the same way that you would engage with any other artist, what is their motivation for that? It's because they want to know how you think, right? They want a glimpse into your process, into who you are, right? So if you're trying to be someone else, I guess we kind of touched on that before, it's not going to come across. So I guess to bring it back to distribution, I used TuneCore in high school, and then I use DistroKid now. But definitely, I guess, do what makes the most sense for you. Yeah. Do what feels right. You don't have to do it the same way everybody else is, but definitely have a plan, right? And like Will touched on, engage in any way you can, whatever feels authentic to you, and you will get those unexpected reactions that will become a big part. I find I remember one song on the album that I thought everybody was going to hate. It's 8 minutes long. It's this crooning 2-chord song. I was so nervous to release it, and by far, people were messaging me like, "JAD, I was biking home crying to this song." I was like, "Please be safe. Do not ride your bike while crying.
Don't bike and cry, please."
Yeah, you know what I mean? So I guess to bring it all back, just release it the way that makes the most sense to you. If you're not the kind of person who wants to do a huge photo shoot and all this to release one single, don't do that. Release it in a way that feels true to you, because people want to connect with you, not some made up version of yourself, right?
Totally. I think a lot of us can get lost in that. We think we need to do that, or we just, it's the influence of social media, right? You see it all over and you think, oh, I have to do that too, because if I don't do that, I won't get this amount of views. But in reality, some of those people that are putting out that content could themselves not even be really connecting with anybody, and they might be struggling more than someone like yourself, JAD, who's like, I'm just going to release it how I kind of want to, and if it resonates with people, awesome, right?
Well, that's the thing. And I guess don't underestimate over time, what I've learned too is that if you have a little bit of a budget to put some PR into it, definitely do it, because I'm the kind of person where I will freak out over all the possibilities of what I could be doing, that I'd rather have someone whose job it is to get it in the right place, do that for me. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah, there's no harm in putting a little bit of money here and there for advertising or for PR. I think there's nothing wrong with it. Like, you can really never go wrong. But it is about being careful, right? And making sure it works with what you're releasing. Now I'm curious to know from the both of you, when you've ever released a song that maybe didn't like view wise or listen wise get to the expectation you were hoping, how do you kind of get through that process as an artist? Because I know myself, I've released a few tracks here and there that didn't really do as well as I was expecting. I put kind of my heart and soul into it. I messaged everyone I knew being like, this is my new song, my new album, and nothing kind of came out of it. Will, have you ever had an experience with this, and how do you kind of deal with that as an artist? How do you move past it and move forward?
First of all, everybody has had an experience like that, for sure. You just kind of have to reset your expectations and understand that, like, music is incredibly subjective, right? Music and art in general.
Yeah.
And also, like, sometimes people just have way too much other stuff going on in their life. So, for example, with everything going on right now, most people are kind of like self quarantining or whatever, social distancing, and a lot of people are working a lot less. And so the assumption is people are streaming a lot more music.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my Spotify streams have actually gone down, to be honest. The reason, I'm assuming, is that people are streaming Netflix. They're not streaming Spotify. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
So everybody, like, you know, we were out on tour when this all escalated. It was a really fascinating and heartbreaking experience because this tour was really well planned. We had partnered with another duo from Los Angeles, and we were all four like in the same van. We'd worked really hard together to like put it together so that it was like economical, but like everything was in place. We had like marketing that I had spearheaded, and Matt from Quitting Whitney had like done most of the booking outreach and stuff. It was supposed to be 10 shows in 11 days, with a festival as an anchor.
Wow.
And we got to play 2 of those shows before we started to realize that everything was going to go sideways. And at that time, when we realized that, we were as far away from LA as we were going to be. And we played 2 shows and shaken people's hands and sang karaoke on the same mic at the bar afterwards. And like, so we basically were like, all right, how are we going to A, be safe, B, not completely just bawl our eyes out for the rest of the trip because we're so disappointed, and C, like, make the most of this so that we can actually get something out of it. So the guys from Quitting Whitney and we had like a little bit different of approaches to specifically how we did that. I took the opportunity to like pre-launch my Patreon, or rather Ships of Saled's Patreon, which I'd been working on really, really hard, but I was not ready to launch. With that being said, we got like 17 patrons overnight, like in 24 hours after telling our story and kind of being like, this is okay, this is the next step because virtual shows are going to be where it's at, right? And with that being said, now I still have a whole lot of work to do on that front. As far as like what we both did, we decided that we were going to follow our tour route. We had 3 days at an Airbnb in Albuquerque, and from what we were seeing in LA, nobody, even people who had really severe symptoms, were having trouble getting tests. And we all like live with people. I'm married. Art has kids. Like, we did not want to like bring anything back. So we did some research and we realized that Albuquerque actually had some drive-through test centers that were, you know, pretty efficient and whatever. So we dedicated half a day to go and do that. We shot a music video each in the Airbnb, and we gathered enough content along the way to like probably edit together like a mini doc that's going to be a great content piece for both of us. And then on the way home, kind of reflecting on how like kind of surreal this whole situation was. This song that had been finished for quite a while, like over a year, and I was just like, it hadn't really showed me where it was going to live in our world. It popped back into my head and I was like, whoa, it lives here. Like, this is what we're going to do. Like, this was supposed to be a live year for us. This was the first of what was going to be like 4 legs of tour. And now like that, none of that is going to happen. Right. So I don't know. I guess this is not as much around like a release, but it's the same concept. You just have to like, you have to take the hit and keep going. Like, whether it's, you know, people not streaming as much when you're expecting them to, or people not reacting the way you hoped towards a song, or just the universe throwing the whole frickin' bucket at you. Like, you know, like you just have to, if you're not prepared to just kind of like dust yourself off and like keep going,
Mm-hmm.
then it might be time for like a 6-month break or something.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. A little bit of time to kind of reconsider and replan, I guess, is another way too. And actually, it's interesting you mentioned that, because our this whole show basically actually came to be because of the pandemic. But I'm really grateful for it in a sense, because I never would have met all of these artists I've met today, and it's really interesting to tap into all of your guys' worlds, and because you literally quite are all around the globe. So
Mm.
I'm really interested to kind of support you guys too, because I know it's hard to reach out to people in LA or in Nashville. It's kind of like, how do you do that without being like that weird person on your Instagram that's like, hey, I
Yeah.
want to support you and I'm from here, and you're kind of like, okay. So I think this has been a really cool opportunity. Now, Jad, have you ever had a negative experience with releasing where you kind of had to grow from it, or
Oh,
where you
tons.
kind
Yeah,
of,
all the time.
yeah.
I mean, for starters, I no matter how finished the song is, when it comes time to put it out, I'm like, so everyone's gonna hate it, first of all. So, but that's how I am with most of my work. It's just, I think we're always, when you're sharing a part of yourself, that's a natural thing.
Oh, absolutely.
It's there have been a couple of really standout moments that that really stuck with me. I remember, shortly after that that show, the album release that was so successful, like, riding
Mm-hmm.
such a high, we'd wanted to do the same thing for a couple of the new singles, and it fell flat, like, and it was like, I felt so embarrassed after the show, right? And it was, I mean, it was a different time, right? You're not in the same community. Everyone's somewhere else now, right?
Yeah.
I've had it where, I released a song that I really was proud of, but I didn't know necessarily if it would connect with people, just by the nature that it doesn't really follow a certain sound. But what I what I took away from all of those experiences is that with with your work, you have to just let it be, right? um you can't control the outcome. Ultimately, you can't control the outcome of what you're going to get. I mean, you can put everything into it, but if it doesn't, if you can put $3,000 into a campaign, and yes, you'll see results that you've predicted, but
Yeah.
at the end of the day too, you could just put out a song and share it share it on Reddit, share it through Facebook. Somebody knows somebody and they send it to their friend over here who sends it.
Yeah.
It there's really no way. So I think what I did is I really did a lot of work internally to stop paying attention
Mm-hmm.
to how many views is this going to get, how many listens is this going to get. The reason I do what I do, and it comes down to, what is the reason that you're doing it for, right? For myself, it's about my process. And I really started kind of shifting my mentality into, okay, for me, it's about making something, taking an idea and really making it as beautiful as possible. You can never find perfection, that doesn't exist, but just making it as beautiful as I can make it,
Yeah.
and then sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
Sharing that for the sake of sharing it, not because it's going to get 10K views or 100K views or a million views or one view. It doesn't matter. It's about sharing it and letting it find who it finds. And yes, now I'm in a place with some more knowledge and maybe more resources to put into PR or something like that, great, I can do that. But ultimately, it comes down to, what have I gained out of the process of making, of taking this from point A to point B, right?
Mm-hmm.
What did I get out of my process? And I saw a really great quote. I'm gonna just find it from my phone. It was Rick Rubin. He always posts these quotes on Instagram and then deletes the post like the next day. So I always just screenshot them. But this one came at me the other day, and it was so important because I was thinking about all of this actually.
Mm-hmm.
And it says the best way to serve the audience is to ignore them. And I think that's 100% true. From the standpoint of, when it comes to making your work, it's not about the audience, it's about what you're communicating.
Yeah.
Right. And so I just shifted my whole mentality to the point of, like, I'm not making music for the attention or for how much it's getting back, or how much is coming back to me, I'm making it so that I can share it and so that I can grow artistically and kind of get some new experience out of that and learn and grow, develop, right? And you're sharing that development with people.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. You guys are like very inspiring people. I'm so glad to have had the
Thank
both
you.
of you on, because just
Oh,
listening
thank
to you,
you.
I'm like, wow, yeah, you're right. I need to do that. Well, that was actually our last question for the day. We're actually out of time, but I really want to thank you both for being a part of the show today. If you guys are at home watching this on YouTube, our Table Talk, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell button to be notified when we release our shows. We also release our shows out on Spotify, so if you're more of a Spotify person, you can also check out the Vienna Whyte podcast. So before we head out, could I get you guys both to just, again, say your artist name and where our audience can find you on social media? Will, can you start it off today?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you for having us. This was really, really fun, and I think it's great what you guys are doing, and I have no problem responding to Instagram messages. I thought it was really sweet of you to reach out.
Thank you.
My project is called Ships Have Sailed, and you can find us everywhere on socials: Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and Patreon newly. So yeah, I hope you stay in touch. I like to make new friends, and always open to feedback about music as well.
Fantastic. And JAD?
Well, yeah, again, yeah, thank you so much for having us. This was fantastic. Like Will, I love I may not respond to messages on time, but I love responding to messages. I love receiving them. You know, there's no harm in reaching out. That's how I connected with the studio in LA. I just reached out, right? So yeah, so you can find me on Instagram's the main one, I guess, at JAD Music, JADMUSIC. Or on Facebook, JAD H Music. I couldn't get JAD Music. Spotify, there's a link to my Spotify, wherever you can listen to music. But yeah, if you go to my Instagram, at JAD Music, there'll be a link to everything else.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. Have a great day. It was nice meeting you both. Bye-bye.
Thanks so
You as
much.
well. Thanks for having me.